For section 7.2, we're going to go over physical properties. So physical properties are just characteristics of material that can be observed or measured without changing the substance. That's the key thing. The substance is not going to change. It's going to remain whatever substance it started out as, okay? So different types of physical properties that we can observe or measure are things like viscosity, which is the resistance to flow. So usually think about this in terms of like liquids and like how thick they are. That's the viscosity. So usually a viscosity is going to decrease when substances are heated. Okay, so if you have something like honey, if you have cold honey, it's not going to flow very well. So it's going to have a very high viscosity. But if you were to heat up the honey, it's more easily able to flow. So like if we were to kind of like put it down a ramp, it would go faster if it was heated up. It would have a lower viscosity. Okay, but in general, honey and corn syrup have a very high viscosity, means that it's going to resist flow. It's going to be thicker. Whereas water and vinegar have a low viscosity. It's going to run very fast down a ramp, and it's pretty thin. We would call it thin. Okay, and the next is conductivity. So conductivity can be applied to either heat or electricity, and so it's just looking at the material and its ability to allow either heat or electricity to flow. So with this, we can have conductors or insulators. And we kind of talked about this before when we talked about heat transfer. But conductors are going to be very good at allowing heat and allowing electricity to flow. So good conductors of heat would be like metals. That's why we have our pans made of metal. Good conductors of electricity are metals as well. So like silver is one of the top conductors of electricity. Insulators are going to be things that do not conduct very well and don't allow heat or electricity to flow. So things like wood is a good insulator, like cotton is a good insulator. It's not going to allow heat or electricity to pass through. The next is hardness or malleability. So malleability is just the ability to bend and shape. So some objects are very easily bendable, whereas others are not. So we can measure that physical property. Some other physical properties are things like magnetism, so being able to be attracted to a magnet, the melting and boiling point of a substance, the color, the texture, the density, and if it's soluble, meaning that it'll dissolve in water. For separating mixtures, we can actually use physical properties of materials to separate out substances. So for example, we can use filtration, and this is going to be separating the substances based on size of particles. So if we had a sieve that allows only certain size particles to pass through, we could separate a larger particle from smaller particles. For number 2, evaporation and distillation, this is going to utilize the physical property of a boiling point. And so basically, if we had like water and rubbing alcohol mixed together, rubbing alcohol has a lower boiling point. So if we were to heat the substance, the rubbing alcohol will boil off first and we'll be left with just the water. So it is a good way of separating substances based on their boiling points. Okay, we can also separate mixtures by magnetism. So if we had a bunch of iron shavings in some sand, we could get all the iron shavings out by using a magnet because the sand is not going to be attracted to the magnet. And then last is solubility. So if we had salt and sand mixed together, we could get the salt out of the sand by putting water into that sample, because the salt will dissolve in the water, and then we would be left with just the sand.